Hey, you guys, welcome back to Blunt Blowin Mama podcast. I am joined by an amazing
Mm-hmm.
I am joined by a super dope guest. You probably follow her on Instagram. You guys know that I'm like deep into my shroom journey right now. Well, I wouldn't say I'm deep into it, but I'm leaning more into that type of plant medicine now these days, especially with my healing, especially, I guess my son is 4. I'm out of postpartum now. So like I'm actually like, we're both killed. Like we're out here, we're in the world. But anyways,
Yes.
I digress. I have an amazing guest on, and we are going to be talking about plant medicine. We're going to be talking about psychedelics, cannabis, womanhood, the Black community, all the things. Please introduce yourself, Mama. You are like an expert. I love following you on Instagram.
Thank you. Thank you. So my name is Mikaela de la Myco, for those of you who don't know. I'm like an originator and creator within what I call mushWomb consciousness, which is the intersection of womb wisdom and entheogen education. There's so many amazing intersections. This archetype of a medicine woman, psychedelic mom, and sacred hoe. So I create, and my platform just really centers that archetype. And so I create from within that space. And so I'm just so happy to have met you, Shonitria, and just like, it's rare to find like-minded moms in the space that also, cover these delicate topics like, pregnancy release, supporting folks through all points of the pregnancy, birthing, extended breastfeeding, toddler continuum, which we are on. I have a 3-year-old myself. So we're like,
we're bosom buddies.
We are. And, it's just a different thing when you're raising these beings that like talk to themselves now in the ways that you've talked to them and like have a big emotional life. And how do entheogens, cannabis, and all these medicines really support that journey? So I'm so happy to speak with you today, and brought some allies with me, brought some of my plantitas. So happy to talk about those if we get to them. But yeah, thank you.
Look at me, like camera cuts to me, Shonitria is in a cloud of smoke.
Like, how did this happen?
It happened with intention. But I really want to, let's just segue into like, you're a mom. You believe in plants and the healing power of those plants. I saw a post of yours and I was on your page last night, and you were talking about, you just mentioned this right now, the voice that your kids have, that inner voice is actually our voice in their head saying, don't do that, don't do this, if you do that. And when you think about the inner voice you have now, when you're doing things, you probably hear your mom's voice or your grandma's voice or your dad's voice or that auntie or that uncle, whoever raised you, that guardian in your life, that parental figure. You probably still, even as a grown ass woman, hear that voice in your head because you're still that little girl on the inside, right? So when you brought that up and you were saying that like, I need to be more mindful of how I talk to my kids because my voice will be in their head, not only now, but years from now. And I need to be mindful of the words that I am putting on that mind and on that spirit, that tiny little spirit. They're hearing mama's voice.
Yes.
So like, talk to me a little bit more about that, because I thought that was so profound and just like powerful,
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, because it was just a very recent revelation. And I just love conversations that you've had with other sisters in the space around inner child healing, because not only is the voice of my child the voice that he hears and the things that I say to him, but also the way he's speaking to himself is the way he's perceived and seen me speak to myself.
Woo.
I was like, oh, the implications of this are huge.
Wow, the stakes are so high.
It's not just about what we say to our kids, it's like what we say to ourselves. Like, I'm just reminded sometimes of like the way that my mother, she's a folk herbalist. She taught me everything I know about plants, and she really indoctrinated me into this life way that we can receive medicine from the earth. And she is and was living in a generation that really didn't talk about the womb, didn't really talk about menstruation, didn't really do that education, and didn't really do that initiation into like this rite of passage of blood. And so I just like, anytime I bleed, I look at my moon and I just hear my mother like screaming in the bathroom. Like anytime, she's a very dramatic Italian lady.
like, why is she screaming at the bathroom?
She just is like big emotion. She's a Leo too, so she just is like
big energy.
Big energy and very theatrical. And I loved growing up with her. And I remember like when she would start her moon, it would just be like a loathing experience. Just like, oh, like here we go again. And you know, it's so funny how like you were saying, we hear the voices of those people and as like conscious agents in our own evolution are like renegotiating about what those words mean for us as adults. You know what I mean? So it's like I hear my mom and I look at my blood and then I see my son and then he's asking me, do you have blood? Are you on your mooning time? And I'm like, mommy's on her mooning time right now. And like, you know, it's cool. Like just because you were raised from this muck or whatever the muck you were raised in doesn't mean that's your forever place. Yeah. And that's what I really love about this like negotiation with the inner child that we're doing with ourselves and with our kids is like, we can actually teach them to also, yes, just because mommy is responding this way, you also are an agent in your own experience. And giving children license and agency to truly be themselves, I feel, is been healing my fucking inner child. I grew up in a very authoritarian household, going to Christian church, Christian school, Catholic school, and so many adults along the way was like, this is how you need to live. And what's really cool is like they are listening, they are hearing, and I really pray that they are able to also like digest and also like renegotiate their terms with the way that we are. So, you know, I love your perspective around just like, I was listening to your podcast and just like, I pretend like I have it all together. And that's like a disservice to motherhood, like as an energy, because it's true. Like we're not always at like the peak of our game. You know what I mean? And it's just, what I hope that my child sees and what every child sees is like parents that love and are trying. And within entheogens too, I'm learning so much response, not react. And when I do react, my child picks it up and he just sends it right back to me. He'll say the very things that I've said to him. And I'm like, whoa, this is very important. They're always listening.
They're always listening.
And
they're always watching.
They're always watching. And it's cool because it's never too late to make a different choice.
It's never too late to course correct.
That's right.
To say, hey, you know what? I think we're going the wrong way. Let's, it's okay. And I think that we have to give ourselves permission. We have to give ourselves permission to fail. And we have to give ourselves permission to be imperfect. It's okay.
Yeah. And medicine really shows us that. I think it's not as glamorous as people would make it. You know, you mentioned about your journeys that you were taking and, you know, it's not as you expected, but it's so revealing of like the unconscious material that is within and kind of forever governing our lives. So it's cool that we are given, you know, by Creator these like gifts to assist us in our reflection, because then we can course correct when we have perspective. But if we're in the rat race, it's really hard to look at our personalities, really hard to look at our childhood and say, how would I like to compost this material into a life that I would like to be living now? And so, yeah.
And taking charge of that life, I feel like, and we can get into just like, you know, you're like the mush womb queen. Okay, we're gonna get into that term, you guys. But I want to say, like, before we start talking about that, I have talked about like my journey with shrooms, and I don't know how old I was. Maybe I was like 19. Maybe I was like 20. I was in college. I was a college age.
Yeah.
And I just remember like my friend was like, these taste really bad. Aww, and I was like,
yeah. That's what everyone says.
She was like, and they're very chewy. And I'm like, so they taste bad. It's going to take me forever to actually chew and swallow them. Great. She's like, but most people put them in sandwiches or something like that. We went through the drive-thru and got like some sandwich from some drive-thru, and we like put the whole shroom inside the sandwich, and like she had some and I had some, and I was like,
yeah, it does not sound like a great way to eat mushrooms.
Highly don't recommend. I'm looking back and I'm like, wow, you dinosaur. Like, why didn't you think to like at least grind it up or break it up or something?
Put it in tea, anything.
But eating it raw. Don't do that, you guys. It's nasty. And also can upset your stomach.
Course correct. Yeah. I would, but there are ways. So we could talk about the ways.
We can talk about the ways.
Talk about the ways.
my first trip was
Mm.
amazing.
Yeah.
My first trip was life-changing. My first trip like I still can remember it, like, and us just like tripping together and me being like, did that bush move? And like the floor is moving, and like I just loved it so much. I had so much fun, but I didn't go into it with intention. I didn't go into it thinking like I need to heal. I was like, oh, let's try this new fun thing, like let's go trip on some shrooms. Like at that point I already been smoking weed, so I was like, okay, I know how that feels. This is also like a plant-ish herb. This is natural, so let's try this. That was my first time.
Yeah.
Fast forward many years later, and I never really thought about doing shrooms again because I don't know, just like the availability of psychedelics, especially on the East Coast, is just not the same, especially until maybe recently, and now you probably can have more access, but it just wasn't top of mind for me. And I had done like LSD, I had done like MDMA or Molly, as it was called when I took it. Has many names.
I know.
And so I did those things, and I was like, okay, like that's that. Like I don't have to revisit that. I had a horrible acid trip. Like
it can be hard medicine.
It was my first acid trip was really nice. And the second time I took it, I thought like, this is what schizophrenia feels like. Like this is not this is not for me. I felt very out of control, and it lasted way too long. Like the high. I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And I was up all night. It was crazy.
Yeah.
By myself. I don't know why I took acid by myself. Why did I do that? Anyways.
I did that before, but
you did that? Like,
yes,
I
did that before.
Anyways, so last year, or probably the year before last, I was like, let me go back to shrooms because I had been hearing a lot about it. I knew somebody who was selling it, a homegirl. And so I was like, okay, I can support a small Black woman business. I can also get back into shrooms. And she was telling me, no, there's this resource called Double Blind, which you know about as well. They have like all of this education on mushrooms.
Totally.
And they had a recipe or like a way to basically make mushroom tea on their website. And I was like,
well, thank you for that.
Thank you, Double Blind.
Try it again.
So I was like, well, that makes it feel and will probably taste better if I put it in a tea. Like that makes sense. Oh, grind it up, dumb girl. Like, oh, like do all these things. Don't just eat it and drink it. And like, don't even like you can strain out the shroom itself, and it's just tea. So changed my fucking life. Like I made a tea, had it like waited until the kids went to bed. Me and my man at the time, we took
that's the mommy hours right there.
Yeah,
it's mommy mushroom hours.
Like, oh, clock out. We made sure we wore them out during the day. Just because I had tripped before, so I know that like sometimes you need to make sure that like nothing's gonna disturb you, especially your kids. Like you just don't want that during a trip. So like they were knocked out that night, luckily. And I had a really great trip. But I was like, I don't want to trip at home. Like I like tripping in destinations and somewhere like a scenery, like in nature, something like that. Like I don't want to be at home and like I look to the right and I'm like, dang, I got to do laundry. Like I don't want to think about
do all that before
things.
You eat the mushroom, right?
Yeah. So like the mushrooms can't take away mom mode. It just can't make that go away. But you can go away and get in the destination. So the next time I did shrooms, it was in Joshua Tree, and that was really powerful. And I had a great trip. And after, it's never the trip itself for me that shifts things within me. It's the days and weeks that follow the trip is when things start to become even more clear. I start to understand something that I maybe envisioned or was meditating on during that time. Things become more clear. And with each trip, things became more clear. And one of the things that you alluded to before, which is that I was abusing cannabis. My relationship wasn't good. My relationship had eroded with the plant because I was going through so much turmoil in my own personal life that I felt the only thing that or person that could support me was my homegirl weed. Weed was there for me. And so I was using it, and I was using it to wake up, and I was using it to go to sleep at night, and I was using it to go to work, and I was using it to play with my kids, and I was using it to I was like, damn, is there ever a time when you don't need weed, girl? And there's nothing wrong with that. But my tolerance was getting higher.
Right.
And I just noticed little things, and I'm just like, this is not okay. Having weed to go to sleep because maybe, whatever, every now and then, but every other night or every night, every morning, every night, right. And then I'm looking at how much I'm spending, and I'm going through weed, and I'm just like, this is not okay. My body should be balanced naturally. My body should be able to know when it's time to rest, and I'd be able to rest at night, and I not need a sleep aid every night. Cannabis at that point had become a sleep aid. And so having shrooms and being honest with myself, and my last trip last year, I had these intense downloads during the trip of you need to love yourself more. You need to honor yourself more. You need to go harder for yourself. You need to put yourself first, but for real, put yourself first. How are you going to show up for your family? How are you going to show up for your community? How are you going to be the woman that you want to be if you're not loving that woman and taking time to support that woman? You can't be like, oh, you didn't support me, and you don't support me when you're not supporting yourself. I wasn't supporting myself in the ways that I needed to. And that trip told me that. I did not ask for that message. And that was what was coming to me and to my heart and to my spirit, and everything that followed. I wrote on my Instagram that after that trip of realizing that I needed to love myself more, 2 months later, I broke up with my man.
Wow.
And I decided to make a big move. And then I started shifting. The energy literally started to the world started to turn different. And I people started gravitating into my life, and it was clicking. I was looking for things and answers in certain areas, and all of a sudden it started to come.
Wow.
I was ready.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Anyways.
I know it to be true.
That's just my little testimony. And so I haven't tripped this year, but I do have intentions to do so. And I'm really looking forward to it, because every time it brings me answers, it brings me closer to me. And my intentions go into it, hoping for that as well. And just hoping for a moment of solitude and peace for me.
Totally.
Which is really, as a mom, as a Black woman, needed. And it's powerful. But I would love to hear, first about mushWombs.
mushWombs. Yes.
And where that term comes from, and kind of, what your teachings are around it with your community, and what we can, let's start there.
So mushWomb as a terminology is also a means of survival, because when I was kind of, in COVID time, coming up in this space and this movement, I was invited to come host a room on Clubhouse. And so Clubhouse is an old school app, and a lot of us found a lot of friends there through COVID.
I did.
Yeah, it was a great space, and it still is a great space. It's still functioning. And, I was in there, and there were so many great conversations happen around entheogens and psychedelics. And we had a community there because there's a lot of shadow banning of certain pieces of content around psychedelics on most of the major media platforms like YouTube or Instagram or TikTok even. And so I was invited to hold this space, and I was like, well, what kind of space do I want to hold? What kind of conversations am I trying to have? And for me, I've been always so deeply interested in ancestral knowledge, right? And retracing the matriarchal lineage of medicine holding, we see psychedelics right now in the space. It's very pharmaceuticalized, a lot of white coat energy, a lot of white man's paperwork energy. You have to have a degree. You have to have, these trainings in order to be able to sit and serve. And I've been really standing against that for a long ass time, because I came up in a folk medicine background. And so I'm like, what makes a person is very similar to midwifery, for example. It's what makes a white coat better and more equipped to facilitate birth than someone who's been facilitating birth for generation after generation.
Paper.
And they actually, that piece of paper didn't actually teach them shit when it first came through that they wanted to transition to hands of power. How do babies get born here? There were huge mistakes that were made by the medical establishment. The Business of Being Born is a great documentary by Ricky Lake that like really describes this in a good way. So please get on your history about midwifery and the West, because a lot of things have happened at this separation point, this like disintegration of folk medicine and indigeneity, while we're, moving through this understanding and intelligence about certain aspects of life, like childbearing and also entheogen journeying and having medicine experiences. And so, I really wanted this space to feel like we could get all the sisters in the room that have been cultivating, that have been sitting with medicine. I want a space for moms to be able to discuss these topics that like we don't get a lot of support in discussing. This is a resource-based space. So I was thinking of a name and I was like, man, like what is going to be a poppin' ass name and like be able to carry, the code and the message of what kinds of things we're going to be discussing. And mushWomb Temple came to me and I was like, ooh, mushWomb Temple. Okay, like this is the space where we're going to come to discuss the intersection of like motherhood, psychedelics, sensuality, the womb care. And so I am 9 years into my womb care education. So I have a beautiful and loving mentor, femtor, teacher, guide, and like these womb care ways that initiated me into a tradition of yoni steaming and womb care called the Mayoni Ot tradition. And so, that's so much of my like background is like in hands-on womb care with the support of plants, practices, and ways of being. And what I really loved about the tradition I was raised up in is that it's so deeply entrenched with spirituality. It's so deeply entrenched with traditional African religion, Kemetic traditions, ancient Egyptian traditions. And as you can see, like I'm tatted with all these fucking codes and like ways of remembering, because it's like, I'm always like diving deeper into these ideas and concepts. And so mushroom consciousness weaves the world of like indigenous medicine ways. And so there are some medicines that I really sit with and connect with and I'm supported by always, from the plants to the fungus allies to, these trees and vines that we find so much medicine in. And this womb care tradition that I was initiated into and carry with me, my ancient Egyptian ancestry, the Orisha, and all these beautiful ways of connecting with the womb in a non-physical way, but on a psychosomatic tip. So all the education, Clubhouse exploded. I got a lot of help in that space. And then I started to kind of weave my way out. And when I mentioned to you about, this terminology, mushroom is like a way of survival, is because this message needed to be continued to be shared. And on these platforms that were like, anytime I said psychedelics, anytime I did a hashtag psilocybin or anything, like it would get taken down. I'd get threatened, like, we're about to shut down your account. And my account was growing. And I was like, what can I do to protect myself and to keep this education going? I had to encode it. So instead of saying mushroom, I always said mushWomb. So on all my videos on TikTok, it always says mushWombs, because it kept the education going. So it's, when I see the name get appropriated, I see it some spaces now, and I'm always just like, but what's your flow? Like, are you part of this resistance? Like, or are you taking a term that you think is cute and then just trying to like slap it on a label and call it your product? And I'm like, this is really, it has a specific audience and it has a specific intention, is to like maintain these traditions and to still center and rematriate psychedelics.
Yes. Why womb?
Why womb? Because this is the womb care practice that, you know what I mean? A. And B, if you've like sunken into the mushroom space, it's a very womb-like place. It's like in the traditions that we've sitting in mushrooms with, it's always done at night. And the womb is a dark space. If your fetus inside is just warm and it's like all enveloping and it's dark, and you just hear like these glimpses of like words and meaning and voices. And that's what it sometimes feels like to be in the mushroom space. Like you were saying before, I got all these downloads, and sometimes it's not always like a big voice or a picture or something like that, but it's like this knowing now. You just know these things now, and you come out the other side like reborn. And so I feel like the womb and birth is like such an amazing allegory for like what it's like to go through. You call it a trip, and you know, I call it a journey. Like I go through my journeys, and it feels a bit like you're going through, and sometimes these journeys are not easy, and so they can feel like contractionary. They can feel like a bit painful, but what's on the other side of that is light and appreciation and a lot of wisdom. And so I feel that womb, of course, really embodies that. And for me, the mushrooms are, there's so many cool intersections of ancient Egyptian and Kemetic spirituality. Heteru Hathor is a cow goddess. And so she, it's from her like cow pies that the mushrooms grow from. And her head is here. And I don't know if you can actually see it on the video, let me know. But her head is the shape of a uterus.
Oh my gosh.
And so the two ears are the ovaries, and inside of each ear in the carvings are like a little earring, which is supposed to be an egg. And so if she is the uterus, and if she is embodying this, and it's from her body that we get the mushrooms, like there's been a long time connection with like these two ways of life and these two places in consciousness. So just trying to reweave like those connections again through this education.
I love
Thank you for asking.
I love that. So I need to ask, like, did you know, being so deep into this understanding and love and incorporation of plants and all things, I think, like, I want to say like natural and good for you in your life, like when you entered your journey into motherhood, did it ever occur to you that you would need to stop those things, that you would need to put plants to the side and put mushrooms to the side, cannabis, you smoke weed obviously, cannabis to the side, that you think like, I need to, like, now I'm about to be a mom now, I have to stop this part of my life?
Right. So there is so much pressure when a person finds out that they're pregnant, everything they should and should not do. From the food that they eat, what food should I take in? And that's always been a big question. It's like, how do I be in my fertility? How do I gestate a child in a good way? In a way that nurtures them, in a way that nurtures myself. And so the question is like, you know, what should I bring into my body that's going to be helpful? What should I take out of my practices that's not going to be helpful? And there's just a lot of chatter about what's okay and what's not okay, from the foods that you eat to the things that you smoke to the medicines that you ingest. And so I kind of knew that going in. I had an unplanned pregnancy. And so once I found out, I was like, whoa, pump the brakes, because I have a really close relationship with MDMA. And definitely sat with MDMA while I was pregnant and didn't know it. And so like there were things I was concerned about. I was like, did I cause harm? Like now, like let's wipe the slate. Let's like not do anything super harmful until I do my research. And so many like women are in that space, and so many birthing people are like, where is the education that like can tell me definitively or maybe non-definitively like what's okay for me to have as far as entheogens, and like what's safe for me and my baby.
And who can I safely talk to about it?
Because even in the underground forums and in all these like cool spaces where psychedelics and like the real human experience of psychedelics get worked out, as soon as someone puts on a forum like, how safe is this? Can I eat mushrooms and breastfeed? It's like met with just nothing but ridicule.
Nothing but negativity.
Shame,
stigma,
if you
judgment.
Google it, there's just not that much there. There's not that much compassionate and thoughtful and well-researched education around this topic.
Which is why it's a fair question every time.
Oh yeah. Everyone should ask this question, and it's good. And you know, people like you, people like myself are like really dedicated to like diving into our own personal experiences, diving into the literature, what is actually here, and what is also cultural knowledge and like traditional knowledge around these medicines, because just because it's on Google doesn't mean that it's true to every person on the planet. And so I was very grateful to have an access point to a medicine woman, and she's an elder in a tradition in Mexico. And I asked her, you know, through my friend who's a translator, what is the relationship? How safe is it to sit with medicines and be pregnant? And so I got the answer from someone who's of lineage and someone who's of a traditional like community framework that's not relying on like the Western establishment for understanding our relationship with the earth. And so once I got that, positive reflection, I was like, well, then I'm going to go sit. And so she sat me for the first time while I was pregnant. I was like 3 months pregnant, and I ate mushroom for the first time while I was pregnant and just felt my body and was like, I feel good. I feel safe. I feel like baby safe. I'm still connected to them. And Mama Cannabis actually called me so fucking loudly when I was pregnant. Like, I've had a very interesting relationship with cannabis. That's why the herbs are here, because I microdose cannabis. That's like my central nervous system. It's a psychedelic for me. Cannabis is like strong messages, like big shifts in consciousness. Like, it can be a little bit shake me to my core. And so I've had big releases with cannabis. And so I'm like, I can't have that all the time. So that's why, me and my friend, like, we started mixing some herbs together. And so I smoke cannabis with other helpful herbs because it's a big weight on your lungs to be smoking all the time. And so I was taught by a dear sister that said, anytime you're going to smoke anything, smoke it with this plant called mullein. And mullein is like incredible for supporting. It's an emollient in your lungs. It's like, it's like soft as tissue paper. And so
it's great respiratory support.
It's such great respiratory support. So it's like, whoa, I'm expanding my lung capacity and also getting high. And this is great. And I feel like I'm at a level of highness that is like not throwing me for a fucking loop. Like, I'm clear, I'm centered. And so Mama Cannabis was like, come back, like, let's have a relationship. So I birthed this company, and then I started smoking weed regularly while I was pregnant. I was like, what a gift of the earth to have these medicines to support pregnancy, which I swear the changes in hormones that happen when you're pregnant, they can turn people that are just like doe-eyed, bright bushy tail lady into just a fucking complete wreck. And so I'm
like, I like to call it vampire emotions.
Yes.
Where like everything's extreme. If you're sad, you're
the saddest.
Weeping. If you're happy, you're elated. If you're angry, you're the Hulk. Like, am I right?
You're absolutely right.
I literally punched like a dent into a trash can, like metal trash can. I'll never forget. I was like maybe like 5 months pregnant.
I believe
so mad. I
believe
went for it. And I was like, oh.
And where do these people turn to? Okay, I'm going to look on Google. And then all it's going to say is mushrooms aren't safe. Don't do them. But here's SSRIs. Here are, other medications that, like, truthfully, we know cause a lot of harm to gestating fetuses.
Just go through it.
Just suffer.
Endure.
Just suffer. And endure and grin and bear it. And especially as melanated
because
women.
That's being woman. That is what womanhood is. Sorry, Eve ate the apple, girl. This is your punishment.
I know.
No, it's not true.
Just like they say, like menstruation is like meant to be suffering, and just like when menstruating is not meant or made to be suffering by design, pregnancy, birth, and postpartum can also feel loving and supported and kind. And so when I came through that and deep into my pregnancy journey, and about 6 months in, second trimester is really different than the first one. And I had midwives. I was like really committed to having a home birth because I just knew like birthing within the medical establishment was like not going to respect my wishes and desires as like the woman that I am. And beyond my sister and I, every single one of my family members on my mother's side of my family have been born at home. So I was like, why would I fuck this up now? Like, I was a C-section. And then before that, my mom was born at home, and everyone down the line.
Wow.
So I was like, I'm just a generation out. I can totally do this. I have the capacity to do this. And so I really committed to that. And I wanted to be really, transparent with my midwives. And I was like, hey, I am eating mushroom. Like, I am having a relationship with cannabis. And they actually gave me fucking pointers. They gave me pointers.
This is what I love to hear because, women during the pregnancy, you're not asking for permission to live your life. You're asking for support, advice, and guidance.
Yeah.
Nobody can give you permission.
Right.
To care for yourself the way that is best.
Yes, ma'am.
Anyways, continue, because shout out to the midwives.
Shout out to the midwives.
We need supportive medical providers and birth workers and people dealing with folks who give birth. Like, we deserve support.
Yep.
all around.
Yes, ma'am. And, I was dealing with the thing. I really had this kind of irrational fear around losing my child, like either during childbirth or really early in the pregnancy, or like that I would have a miscarriage or something like that.
Where do you think that came from?
Well, I asked the mushrooms about it.
What did it say?
You're like, ooh, tell me, what was the secret? What happened? So this story could take forever, but I'm gonna keep it short.
Okay.
So I was 6 months in. I sat with 3 grams of mushroom.
Okay.
My sisters and I, we all sit coven. So we like sit in a circle, journey together. We've been journeying for many years. And I had actually my doula in the building and other dear sisters, like basically my aunties. And so me and the aunties went in, and after a turn of very interesting events with my doula, I ended up in a bathtub and very fucking pregnant, just weeped and sobbed and went into that very question. And it's interesting, like when we ask the mushrooms to show us something, sometimes they don't show us exactly like what we want to see or need to see. And that's why I don't always it's gonna sound weird, but I don't always set intentions with the mushroom. Like, okay, mushrooms, I'm gonna work on this. It's like going to your granny's house and you're like, hey granny, like I just want to learn this thing. And then she has every other story to tell you. And then you walk away with like, actually, I didn't even know that I wanted to hear all these things. And that's actually exactly what I needed, not what I thought I needed. And so with the mushrooms nowadays, I don't like set an intention. I'm going to do inner child healing. It's like, I ask the medicine, it's like, what do you have to show to me? You know what I mean? Like, I'm just an empty vessel. So like, I'm here to listen. And so they took me actually right into that spot, right in that spot that needed the most clarity. And for some cultural references, you might not totally know about like La Llorona. It's a Mexican folk tradition lady. She has a whole story about her, but she's been like visiting me my whole life. And she showed up to me and I was like, wait, this story, this piece of folklore about a woman, trigger warning, like a woman drowns her kids after they're born because she's like wounded by a man she loves. And so I was like, wait a second, like this is a story of like unsupported postpartum depression. And like Moses in the basket came to me and I was like, oh my gosh, like this is also like a cultural history around having to give your children up to like escape enslavement. And then Toni Morrison's book, Beloved, also touches on an enslaved African woman who has to kill her child so that they're not born into the enslavement. And then that baby like haunts her. And so I went through these cultural stories and like processed and wept. And I was like visited by these like these diosas, like these archetypes of like consciousness. And I was like, holy fuck, maybe this fear is like not that far off in the history of like my cultural heritage. Like women would have been fearing the loss of their child. The women would have been maybe worrying about their own life because it's a portal and not every time was it, both of y'all came out the other side. So it's like, this made sense. And so when I processed and I cried for 3 hours and I came out of that bath and I gave the mushrooms back to the water because we made a tea and we gave the mushrooms back to the ocean, I was really called to make a piece of art. And the midwives were like, can you paint about it? Can you draw about it? Can you try to process this symbolically? And like, as an artist, as a watercolorist and a graphic designer, I was like, I have to make a piece of art about this. And when I made the piece of art, I was like, I felt like complete, actually. Like you said, it's afterwards that everything changes in your life. And so I went in one person, I came out, and in the weeks later, that fear neutralized, which was incredible. And I came back to the midwives and I showed them the painting that I'd done that I finished on Halloween. And it is called the Procession of the Star Babies because not all the babies do make it. And so I wanted to make it in honor of like the miscarriages. And I wanted to make it in honor of that being that maybe was going to get sent back to the stars that wouldn't have made it Earthside. And so I have the original and I gift copies to anyone I know who has had an abortion, a miscarriage, or a stillbirth. And so that just gets distributed among the community. And funny enough, at the end of last year, I had a pregnancy release where with herbs and plants and pills and practices, was able to have an out-of-clinic abortion. And so I journeyed in my home. I ate a gram of mushrooms when I took the medication and like went through the whole thing. I ended up in the bath and I was back again. I was like, wait, I'm in the bath. I'm having a pregnancy release. And what I was crying for was the pregnancy release that I would have almost 4 years later. And I was prepared for that because the mushroom like allowed me to work through that shit. And now when I was actually in front of it, was ready for it. And what was on my altar? What was on my altar during that was the painting. So I had like supported myself. The mushroom had showed me through my womb processes, through my womb experiences, like birth or abortion, that it could be there for me to support me across time. And that painting was there in front of me. And I was like, I'm so happy that this painting is here. And how would I have known to make this if the mushroom hadn't showed me through my own fear and processing my own fear that I could be here for myself? So just so much respect and honor for like these sacred medicines working through linear time. Like they don't even operate on linear time. They work on circular time, which is like the womb operates on circular time and rhythms and cycles. And so also just another piece of like what the mushWomb really means is like not just education, but it's like the doing of things. I had an abortion and I ate mushroom like during it so that I could really fully be there in all aspects of not my body, but also my spirit and my consciousness. So that is what the mushrooms taught me about my irrational fear around losing my child in childbirth. And I'm so glad that they did.
Wow, that is a lot.
Yes. Sorry.
For me to process, like,
there's a lot.
Girl, you could have sent me that before we had recorded this, because I'm like, damn, I could like really dive deeper into that.
Yeah,
we could ask another question.
We'll talk about other stuff.
But I do want to just like ask really quickly, because I know when people hear this podcast episode, they're gonna ask me. They're probably gonna ask you. So I'm gonna ask you for them, because I know what people are thinking.
Okay.
How did you go, or why and how did you go about having an abortion at home? Now, I have heard about this.
Right.
I have a healer who I work with, and she does cupping and energy movement for me and massage. Yeah. And she told me that there is a technique that you can do to massage a area like above your foot or something like that. And you can actually cause, if you're pregnant, it can cause a miscarriage.
Totally.
But if you want to, you can actually use that technique to have your own abortion. And I was just like, wait, so you're telling me that by hitting these chakras and doing this massage, just a massage and some herbs, that I could have an abortion at home?
Let's talk about it.
Is that
is that true?
Is it true? Like, I'm skeptical.
Yeah.
AF. I'm just gonna keep it a buck. I'm skeptical.
Yeah.
Please.
Okay.
Let's talk.
We should be skeptical, but I think to assist us in having this conversation, like I want to really bring in this tincture. Is called Queen Anne's Lace Tincture, and I was
going to ask you about
I just want us
too.
to taste it. I just want us to taste it. And my ancestors are in here because you can tincture herbs and all kinds of different solvents are what they're called, but alcohol is a solvent, and you know, people use grain alcohol or vodka. I'm Mexican, so I use tequila. So you're gonna taste a little bit of tequila in here.
I love tequila.
Me too.
Are we like related? I love tequila. Oh
so,
my gosh.
Go ahead and that's for you. And I'll show you, you know, ways to work with
plant bee tincture.
Plant bee.
Take 90 drops every 8 hours for 3 days after accident.
Yeah, accidental insemination. Let's talk about that.
And I don't think
it won't hurt you if you do it now.
I don't think it's ever an accident because we can talk about accidents or not, but I am a firm believer that if you're a man, you can control your ejaculation and you know exactly where you're ejaculating. And if you decide to ejaculate inside of my pussy, it was not an accident.
Trigger warning. Like
that's just on my spirit.
Insemination in that way without consent is sexual assault. I'm
it's
just
sexual
assault.
Right
now. Okay, if I say please don't come inside me and you do, I'm like, so how is that not a sexual assault right there?
How is that not? Because you can control it. You can pull out.
Honey,
you can net on your hand. You can net on my ass. You can say, hey, baby.
Not on my face. Let's make it fucking dope.
You know, they say, baby, open your mouth. Do you want taste?
Yes,
like,
ma'am.
Give me it, put it nut on anywhere.
And if you can't do that,
stomach.
then just finish on your hand or just don't finish at all.
Finish on your own stomach. Yeah. Like, there's so many places for it to go.
Yes,
so
ma'am.
don't give me that shit that it was an accident. Okay,
and
I'm going to try it.
For the situations in which that occurs, that's what the plant bee tincture is. And also just supportive to people's like nervous systems to know that they're going to like support themselves, even if it's consensual. Condom slipped off. There's a lot of situations where these accidents or, you know, accidental insemination might occur. So speaking to this, there are different like ways of approaching what I call conscious contraception, which is you're not on birth control, but you also don't want to like go to Planned Parenthood or take Plan B. It's not bad.
I was thinking I'm gonna have to wash this down.
I was in a situation before where we like looking for a drink, and then I was like, wait, I have tincture. We took a shot of.
First of all,
we took a shot. So the reason I make this for my community is because I just like having bottles of it, because alcohol
really
is a
delicious,
spirit. And so I could take a shot of this and like sit with the medicine of the plant. It has cotton root bark syrup
honey in it. Okay.
It's so like just a bunch of love. I make 1 batch a year. That's it.
I can taste that honey.
It's so good. So is it possible how possible is an out-of-clinic abortion?
Yes.
Very, period. Very possible.
How? Like, can someone like me who only has Google and nothing else figure this out, or should I get someone to assist me?
Yeah, that's a great question. So you know what? There's an amazing resource that I came up like learning about. It's called Sister Zeus, and it's like an old school HTML website that like covers all of these different what they're called amenagog plants. And amenagog means to assist in menstruation.
Okay.
So there are plants that can help bring on menstruation. They have these properties within them that supports the contraction of the uterus, increasing blood flow to the uterus, opening and softening the cervix. And so they also have incredible implications for childbearing, because if you're about to face an induction at the hospital, what plants can I bring in? Black cohosh, blue cohosh, dates. Can I bring in cotton root bark? That is going to assist me in like moving this baby through so I don't have to have Pitocin, for example. And so, you know, just a piece of like cultural knowledge and heritage is, you know, a lot of these folk remedies for abortion were instrumental during times of oppression.
Yes.
And so if we are going to talk about this, like, you know, the enslavement in the South was so ripe with assault that like often women, all they had were the herbs around them in order to be able to, you know, I don't want to have this person's child. I don't want to have master's children. I do not want to be chattel to breeding. And so, you know, the primary plant that was used during the enslavement to induce abortion is cotton root bark. And wow, what a coincidence that cotton is what they were spending most of their time with. So what an answer to a prayer. And that knowledge was carried to them across the ocean from Mama Africa, because we do have traditions of using cotton root bark in Africa and also among the Native Americans for this purpose, for abortion. And there's some other great books that I would highly recommend. One is called Natural Liberty. It has an incredible list of amenagog plants as well. And with every Queen Anne's lace tincture, this is also for you, but that QR code goes to a conscious contraceptive blog that I have all these lists on, so people can get access to the PDF of the book for free. Yes. So that you can have access. So yes, a person that only has Google, you don't necessarily always have access to someone who's going to walk you every step of the way. But I will say that you can patch this together. But what I will say is, if you are going to embark on this, right, a person can really equip themselves before the accident. You know what I mean? Because it's a big thing to ask your body, hey, cotton root bark, I'm going to take cotton root bark and I'm going to take black cohosh and I'm going to have dandelion leaf and I'm going to have all these medicines to bring this action that the body has never really been asked to do before. And so a lot of us, like, we're starting to stockpile our herb shelves with amenagogs just in case, and starting to build relationship with them that signals to the body, yes, it's time to bleed. So there's an amazing practice of like, okay, even if you didn't have an accident, for example, you can drink an amenagog tea or have Queen Anne's lace right before you're supposed to bleed. It's very helpful. It can help reduce cramps. It can help ease menstruation, shorten the menstrual period. But what it also do is it'll tell your body, when I drink this, I bleed. When I drink this, I bleed, right? And so for a lot of people, abortion is a homesteading skill. So it's like, if you can't take inventory of your family and say, how many resources do we have right now? Can I afford another child? And I'm like, no, I can't. Like, that's a skill as a mother to say, well, then I'm going to let this one go because it's not the right time. And yes, you can do that in your kitchen. You can do that at home. And I do a lot of education about this specifically. So if there's anyone that, you know, has questions, like, I'm here to answer those questions, because there is such a beautiful community of folks that have been doing this for such a long time. And, you know, we have each other's back. So, you know, no one ever needs to walk through this alone. And I consult a lot of people. even if they go to the clinic, you could still incorporate herbs. You can still incorporate Western medicine in this process and still make it holistic and still make it loving.
Or after? So let's say somebody decides to go to Planned Parenthood.
Totally.
They take
misoprostol.
Yes. I'm like, what is the word?
Yes.
And you take it and
Yes,
you go
ma'am.
home. You're saying that when they get home,
herbs can still help them. 100%. Okay. I mean, herbs helped me during my misoprostol process.
Yes.
And I was on the phone with my homegirl and I was like, hey, I'm not bleeding yet. What can I do? You know, and I was hitting yarrow. I was hitting mugwort. I was hitting all the herbs that you could possibly imagine. And she said, have you tried hibiscus? Like Jamaica, like the drink that you get at the Mexican restaurant. Like hibiscus has powerful uterine tonic properties. And so I had a fucking thick infusion of hibiscus, and infusion is like 20 minutes or more. It was dark and sour and very bitter. And I had it with had it with a ton of honey, and I started bleeding within like 30 minutes.
What?
And I was like, oh my God, yes. So herbs can help. And if you are going to get a DNC, if you are going to get a manual vacuum aspiration from Planned Parenthood, and they, you know, are going to insert anything into your cervix, you can work with parsley insertions. You can work with black cohosh to soften your cervix in preparation for those things. And then, you know, that makes those experiences more easeful, more calm. I love to work with nervine. So it's like you're nervous, you want to chill, like this is going to be really scary for you. You know, I had mama cannabis on my side. I was working with, you know, oat straw and holy basil and all of these other amazing plants as to prep. And then as the follow-up, I need things that are going to like bring heat and warmth and love to my uterus. So ginger, broths, like there's so much that you can support yourself with plants with. So I'm just never making a distinction like your abortion was like, you know, because it was with the man or is at a clinic. Like it's not natural. It doesn't deserve love and attention, because it does. And I even feel like even more so, right? Because you are at the hands of people that don't always have spiritual consciousness or don't always have this love and kindness and care. And so if we can hold you with plants and we can hold you with pills and practices, you know, any variation of abortion is sacred. And so, you know, plants are here to support that, whether you're in clinic or out. But yes, it is possible to have it out of clinic, and it's possible. Molly Dutton Kelly is another herbalist and abortion advocate in the space. She's also a midwife. She talks about that like 100% of herbal abortion are effective before the 4th week from your last period. So that means 2 weeks of gestation. So you got inseminated, conceived. 2 weeks later, if you like brought those herbs in like the good way, then you can make your period come. And most pregnancies do end in miscarriage anyway. It's already happening. So you're not actually like going out of your way to cause harm to your body. You're actually helping the body participate in a process it probably already does all the time anyway. So just to make this feel as gentle as it is, because people that sit for herbal abortion will tell you it takes a really long time. Going to the clinic, you're in and out in about an hour.
Yeah.
Mine took a month and a half.
Really?
It did. But I will say, my whole body really appreciated that slowness, because I really got to think about it and I really got to sit with the emotions. And when I was on the other side of it and it finally released and it came down and I saw the whole visualized being, I was like, I feel so fucking complete right now. But a lot of the people that I support that go in for their sessions and surgery and things, they come out and they're like, I still have so much processing to do.
Yes. Yeah.
And not just like for themselves and their families, but like what they experienced in the clinic. So it's like now we're just compounding some shit. So, you know, I actually really enjoyed the duration because I really could sit and journal and art and like really be with the medicine of the process. And when it was finally over, I was like, now I feel complete.
I'm not a fan of like bleeding for that long, but
you're not bleeding that whole time.
You're not bleeding? Oh, okay. I'm like,
this is like so like we'll get into something else because like we could talk about it forever.
We can talk about this forever. But yeah, I'm just like,
no, you're not bleeding that whole time.
But I totally get that, and I respect that, and I honestly like going to a clinic to get an abortion is not like this big fancy amazing thing. Like the first time I got an abortion, I'll never forget. I went to Planned Parenthood.
Oh, baby.
The woman next to me was crying.
I know it to be true.
Bawling.
I know it to be true.
And
even in the operating room is like intense. Yeah.
I felt that energy and I felt her and I was like, that wasn't my energy, but when I left, I took some of that from her. I couldn't help it.
They're not checking the vibes of Planned Parenthood.
There's no vibe check. Planned Parenthood, first of all. So yeah. Okay. Lastly, I really just want to chat about psychedelics in the Black community and the impressions of it. We can touch on this real quick. I saw a reel that you posted recently, and you're basically responding to 19 Keys saying that Donald Glover, he went to, I forgot what, like recent award show, and he had on the jumpsuit that where part of his back was out, and he was doing a little moonwalk.
It was very fun. It was very fun.
It was giving Black boy joy. It was giving like, I'm having fun. I'm rich, bitch. It's giving, I got a wife and kids and I'm happy.
Yes.
It's giving.
It was all good things. It was giving all good things.
And he comes in and he's like, I don't know what kind of psychedelics this guy is on, but Black men.
That was really disappointing.
And I said, oh, wow.
He said this is not high level.
He said this is not high level. And then he used psychedelics almost as like a slur.
Yes.
And he lost me.
It was so sad. It was so sad because for so many reasons, it was so sad. And I think one of the major points was during the 1970s, you know, psychedelics were part of a psyop to like kind of unearth the like Black militant movement. And it basically feminized all these men and like made them just distracted and whatever. And I'm like, did he just assume that Black people found out about psychedelics from white people in the 70s? Excuse me. Let's go into a history lesson here because there are too many cultures from
Give us more credit.
They learned that shit from us. They learned that shit from us. So,
and the fact that psychedelics can be seen today by Black and brown people as a white thing bothers me and troubles me deeply because it is all of ours. But it came from us, as does everything. And the fact that you can give it away so easily and then look down upon it because it belongs to them.
Right. It's like teaching us to hate ourselves. But that's like the lineage of colonization. It's just like observe a practice of a people, like demonize that practice, make it criminal. So pull the practice away from them. And what we're seeing now is it's being resold to us. It's being repackaged and sent right back to us like it was their fucking shit. And that was the point of my response to that. And I was just like, hey, let's just also understand that you can be psychedelically inclined, that you can seek into these spaces, express yourself in whatever ways that you want to, and still be part of the movement and still be ready for change and very much coming out healed on the other side. So I don't think psychedelics is not the tool to get you out of your mind. People, and you even mentioned it, like anything, it can create a tolerance. And actually, they are non-habit forming and they do not have this kind of like same level of tolerance that we talk about with cannabis, for example. It really, the beautiful thing that I just want to sit with here is that this is medicine. At the end of the day, it's medicine. And it's for people that are ready and that, you know, contraindications and things we should like consider, of course, you know what I mean? But like with careful care, like these can be very transformative and beneficial to all kinds of people, mothers, fathers, families. I always say psychedelics are for families, grandmas, grandpas, aunties, uncles, and even the kids. And I would love to like move into the frontier of discussing also like the youth's relationship with entheogens too. Because if I had these skills when I was a teenager, I never would have put myself in situations like I did. I leaned on alcohol and tobacco and everything that was available for me. And that caused so much more harm. If I had a mushroom sit or if I had a relationship with these medicines way in advance, my goodness, what my life would have looked like.
You would have been so awake and so open and clear and aligned with yourself. And I think that a lot of people are afraid of themselves and they don't want to admit it. It's so scary to see. I think it's triggering for a lot of Black men to see Black men be free in that way. And they can't wrap their mind around like, it doesn't have to look like that for you, you know, but there's so many men who they see Black men who are in those spaces and they think it must be drugs.
Right.
It must be quote unquote drugs. It must be psychedelics. He must think he's white. But it's like, why is freedom always associated with whiteness? Can we just leave it on that? You know, like like there's questions that need answers, and I don't think we're going to get to all of them in this podcast episode, but you are going to be a guest speaker with me at the Intro to Shrooms workshop that I am hosting on April 9th. And we're going to have this conversation, and we're going to really deep dive into a lot of the things that we just touched on this podcast episode. And I am so excited to get into it with you and to really share with the Blunt Blowin Mama community how we can use plants and how we can use mushWombs to be well and to be one with self and to live the best life, the life that you really, really feel called to living. It's yours. And we're going to talk about that. And this has been an amazing conversation that I can't believe went so quickly. Like I could talk to you forever. What's going on with you right now? What's next? And how can people reach you?
Ashe, thank you so much. Yeah, this went by, it breezed right through, but I'm so happy we were able to dive into the places that we did. So my website is www.mushwomb.love. So check me out on there. I have the conscious contraception guide there. I also am a big advocate around making your own relationship with medicine. And so I make microdosing kits. I support people with education, with crafting their own microdoses, for example. And so I have like a microdose making video, capsules and pastes. And so I really like to
That's a resource.
Be there with people as they're journeying through this. My Instagram is Instagram.com/MamaDellaMyco, MamaDellaMyco. It means mother of the mushroom. And I have some really great things going on. Like you said, I talk about a lot of different shit on my platform, and Sacred Hoe is a really important thing for me, as well as like part of a reclamation of like the full sensual self. And so I am speaking at a polyamory conference coming up in Tucson, Arizona in April as well. And I will be in person there and in person in San Francisco for the 420 portal. So I'll be there actually the 18th and the 19th speaking at a beautiful conference. And so I hope that I get to meet people in person. I think that's a really important place to touch base with folks. I do feature all the products that like we shared about on my website too. So like if you are navigating conscious contraception, like there is a store that centers all of those things. And so cotton root bark, black cohosh, amenagog teas, Queen Anne's lace is all there. And I will say too, the gift that I brought to you is a product called Goddess Breath. And so it's a herbal blends company that I formed with my friend and sold, and I still love very much. So I'm gonna plug it. And it can be a companion herbal blend. There's 10 different blends that can connect with cannabis in a good way and, color your cannabis experience so that you can feel the medicine of other plants like Damiana and lavender and smoke rose petals and all those things. So those are all the things for me. I can't wait to speak to you in person on the 9th. And yeah, maybe we could kick it after this or at some other point in our lives.
For sure.
I want to hang with a good mom.
This has been amazing. Thank you so much for coming through. Again, you guys, catch us again at the Intro to Shrooms workshop on April 9th. That is a Sunday. I think I said Thursday before. Maybe I don't know, child, but it's Sunday. It's Sunday, April 9th at 11 a.m. Pacific time. We will be chatting about all things mushWombs, shrooms, magic shrooms, whatever you want to call it, and how you can integrate into your life and diving deeper into this conversation. I want to talk a little bit more about the Sacred Hoe during the workshop too. Because like, since we didn't talk about it on the podcast, we can get into it on the workshop.
Yes, part 2.
So definitely you guys check out the link in probably the show notes for more info on the workshop. It's bit.ly/shrooms workshop, I think is the link, you guys, but I'll have it in the bio and things in all the places. But definitely check us out there. Check out Mikaela and all the places that she literally said to check her
TikTok,
out. Yes,
all the
please
things.
go to her website, check out these items that she has available for us. And thank you again.
It's been a pleasure.
Like, thanks for all the work that you're doing. You're
trying.
Like seriously, I'm like knocking my mic. I'm like, look, but like it's good work, and like we need people who have skin like this doing this kind of work and being highly visible and not afraid to be highly visible and talk about these things that, you know, oftentimes we are criminalized or penalized in some way for. It's freeing, it's inspiring, it's empowering, and keep doing that. So thank you.
Ashe, mama. Cheers.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.